At my graduation dinner, Dad laughed and said, "You're old enough to start paying rent or get out." The next day, I moved into my new house and told them I'd stop paying their bills. Their faces went pale because you won't believe what happened the night I graduated college with honors. After years of grinding, working 2 jobs, keeping my family afloat, my own father had the audacity to clink his glass, smile that sickly sweet smile I knew so well, and announce to everyone, "Congratulations. But you're old enough to pay rent or get out." My mom just sat there, silent, nodding beside him. They had no idea I'd been planning for this exact moment for months, or that I already owned my own house. The look on their faces the next day? Oh, it would be worth every single penny I'd saved. See, from the outside, we looked like the perfect middle-class American family. 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood in Pennsylvania. My dad, Robert, a senior systems analyst. My mom, Diana, part-time at the library. My younger brother, Jake, and I never wanted for anything. Beach vacations, birthday parties, piles of Christmas presents. Picture perfect, right? But then I turned 15 and everything shifted. One day, Dad came home, face strained. Laid off. 15 years of service, gone. Mom picked up more hours, but her library salary barely covered groceries, let alone the mortgage. "It's just temporary," Dad promised at dinner. "I'll find something better." That something better never came. Months turned into a year. The jobs he could find paid a fraction of his old salary, and his pride took a massive hit. I'd hear him up late, the computer screen glowing on his frustrated face, scrolling through endless listings. Mom worked herself to the bone, but the financial strain was obvious. Bills piled up on the counter. The laughter in our home slowly faded, replaced by tension and whispered arguments after Jake and I went to bed. By 16, I knew I had to help. I got a job bagging groceries after school and on weekends. My first paycheck was just over $100, and I proudly handed it to Mom. "Oh, honey, keep it," she said, but I saw the relief flash in her eyes. "No, Mom," I insisted. "I want to help. We're family." What started as a gesture quickly became an expectation. When the electricity bill arrived with a past due notice, Dad looked right at me. "Sophia, can you chip in this month? Just until I get back on my feet." And I didn't mind. Not at first. I picked up more shifts, added a weekend job waiting tables at a diner. My grades dipped, but I still maintained a B average, all while working nearly 30 hours a week in high school. By my senior year, I was paying for my own clothes, school supplies, activities, and contributing about $300 a month to the household. Dad had found a job, but it was half his old salary, and Mom was still at the library. Yet, somehow, our financial situation never improved. What I didn't know then, what I learned later from Mom, was that Dad had developed a gambling habit. He'd stop at the casino on his way home, convinced he could win back what we'd lost. Mom knew, but felt utterly powerless. He'd promise it was the last time, and days later, he'd be back at the slot machines. Meanwhile, Jake, 3 years younger, seemed oblivious. While I worked double shifts, he played video games and hung out with friends. When he wanted the latest gaming console for Christmas, the money magically appeared. When I needed new shoes for work, I bought them myself. "Your brother is still young," Mom would say when I pointed out the unfairness. "Let him enjoy his childhood." So I did. I worked, I studied, I helped keep us afloat. I watched my father become dependent on my income, not as a temporary fix, but a permanent solution to his own failures. I watched my mother accept this new normal without question. And I noticed how they both treated me differently, expecting adult responsibilities from me while giving Jake all the freedoms of a teenager. When college acceptance letters poured in, I had my pick of schools. But the full scholarship to our local state university made the decision easy. I just couldn't leave my family financially, even though a part of me desperately wanted to escape. "You always were the responsible one," Dad said when I told them. What he really meant was, "You're the one we can always count on for money." I moved into a dorm, but came home every weekend to work my jobs. I sent money for bills. I called daily. I was the dutiful daughter, watching my friends enjoy the real college experience. Party invitations were declined for extra shifts. Spring break trips? Forget about it. Property taxes were due. Through it all, I told myself it was temporary. Once I graduated, once Dad got back on his feet, once our finances stabilized, then I could focus on my own life. But deep down, an uncomfortable truth was sinking in. Nothing was going to change unless I changed it. College was supposed to be my ticket to freedom, but it just became another obligation. My typical Mondays started at 5 a.m. Shower, protein bar, review notes for my 8 a.m. business ethics class. Then straight to my campus job at the admissions office until 2 p.m. Afternoon classes until 5, quick dinner, then studying until midnight. Tuesdays and Thursdays were the same hectic blur. Weekends? No reprieve. Friday evening, drive home, straight to the diner for the dinner shift. Saturdays meant a double at the grocery store. Sundays, diner brunch, laundry, then back to campus. My roommate, Elaine, would often be just starting her weekend when I was ending mine. Sophia, she said one Sunday, watching me stumble in, utterly exhausted, "This isn't normal, you know? Most college students aren't paying their parents' bills." I shrugged. They need the help. "Do they really?" she pressed. "Your dad has a job. Your mom works. Jake's old enough to work part-time. Why is it all on you?" Her questions made me incredibly uncomfortable because I had no good answers. The truth was, I'd never questioned it. It had evolved so gradually, from helping during a crisis to becoming the family's full-time financial safety net. Before I knew it, I was paying the electric, the internet, often the groceries. "The internet's getting shut off," Mom would text. "Can you send $200? Dad's car needs $500 for repairs. We're short on the mortgage this month. Can you contribute $800? Each request came with that unspoken expectation, and I always complied. I'd scrape together my earnings, eat ramen for a week, and send the money. The gratitude would quickly fade, replaced by the next urgent need. By sophomore year, the requests escalated. I was sending nearly 70% of my earnings home. My own expenses were bare minimum. Used textbooks, clothes I wore for years, never eating out unless I got a free meal at the diner. That's when Elaine staged her intervention. "This has to stop," she said, sitting me down one evening. "You're killing yourself while your family takes advantage of you." "They're not taking advantage," I protested weakly. "They need help." "Then why isn't your brother helping? Why did your dad just buy a new TV? Why did your mom post about their weekend getaway on social media?" I had no answers. The new TV had appeared the same week I'd sent money for essential bills. The getaway happened after I'd contributed to a desperate situation with the water heater. "You need to start saving for yourself," Elaine insisted. "Open a separate account they don't know about. Put something away each month, even if it's just $20. Something just for your future." That night, I opened a new savings account at a different bank. I set up direct deposit for 20% of my earnings. It wasn't much at first, just $50 a week, but it was mine alone. As junior year began, I connected with a financial advisor named Harriet through a campus workshop. Harriet reviewed my situation with genuine concern. "Sophia," she noted, "you've taken on an adult burden while you're still establishing yourself. This pattern will continue as long as you allow it." With her guidance, I devoured everything I could about personal finance. Budgeting, investing, boundaries. "Your first loyalty has to be to yourself," she reminded me. "You cannot help others if you are drowning." By senior year, my secret savings account had grown to a respectable sum. I'd secured a high-paying internship with a marketing firm that valued my work ethic and offered me a full-time position upon graduation. For the first time, I could see a future not defined by my family's needs. That's when I made a decision that changed everything. With Harriet's help, I started looking at starter homes. A modest, but growing neighborhood, 20 minutes from campus. Housing prices were reasonable, and with my savings, excellent credit score, thanks to years of careful management and new job offer, I qualified for a mortgage. I found a small 2-bedroom house with a yard and a front porch. It needed some cosmetic work, sure, but the bones were good, and the price? It was totally within my budget, especially considering how much I'd been pouring into my parents' household all these years. 3 months before graduation, I closed on that house in secret. Only Elaine and Harriet knew. I told my family I was working extra shifts during spring break. I signed the papers with trembling hands, simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. "This is the first day of your independent life," Harriet said, witnessing my signature. I kept the house empty for those 3 months, occasionally visiting, sitting on the floor, planning where furniture would go. But mostly, I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation when my family learned I was cutting financial ties. Graduation approached, and with it, a reckoning I both dreaded and desperately needed. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. I put on my cap and gown in the dorm room Elaine and I had shared for 4 years, my emotions a tangled mess of pride, anxiety, and anticipation. "Today is about celebrating you," Elaine reminded me. "Try to enjoy it, no matter what happens later." The ceremony was on the university lawn. As I took my place, I scanned the crowd. My family was easy to spot, Mom waving enthusiastically, Dad checking his phone, Jake looking utterly bored. When my name was called, Sophia Wilson, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude, I walked across that stage with my head held high. In that moment, looking at all those faces, I felt a surge of accomplishment no one could diminish. This achievement was mine. After the ceremony, my parents found me. Mom hugged me tight, Dad clapped my shoulder. "We're so proud," Mom said, her eyes genuinely warm. "For years gone just like that," Dad added. "Time to join the real world now." Jake gave me a perfunctory hug. "Can we eat?" "I'm starving." My parents had reservations at Castellano's, a mid-range Italian place. Not the fanciest, but a step up for us. As we were seated, Dad made a show of telling the waiter, "We're celebrating our daughter's graduation." "Congratulations," the waiter replied. "First round of drinks is on me." Dad ordered an expensive bottle of wine. Mom chose one of the pricier pasta dishes. Jake, a nearly $30 steak. I chose a simple chicken parmesan, already calculating how much this celebration would cost me, because despite Dad's grand announcement, I knew who'd be paying. Through appetizers, the conversation was light. Mom asked about my classmates, Dad about the speakers, Jake complained about the sun. No one asked about my job plans or what came next. It was as if graduation marked an end, not a beginning. As our main courses arrived, Dad cleared his throat and raised his wine glass. "A toast to our graduate, Sophia. We can't tell you how proud we are of what you've accomplished." I smiled, raising my glass, allowing myself a moment of genuine connection. "You've always been responsible," Dad continued, "always thinking of the family first. That's a rare quality these days, when so many young people only think of themselves." Mom nodded, misty-eyed. But Dad said, his tone shifting just slightly, "Graduation marks a transition to full adulthood. And with adulthood comes adult responsibilities." My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what was coming. "Your mother and I have discussed it. And we think it's time you started contributing more formally to the household expenses." I nearly choked on my wine. "More formally?" I spluttered. "Dad, I've been paying bills since I was 16. He waved his hand dismissively. Yes, you've helped out here and there, but now that you'll have a real job, it's time for a more structured arrangement." "Here and there," I repeated, incredulous. "I paid the entire electric bill last month. And the internet. And half the mortgage." "That's all in the past," Dad said firmly. "We're talking about the future. You're old enough now to pay rent or get out." The restaurant noise faded. I stared at my father. His expression was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather, not delivering an ultimatum that completely ignored years of my financial support. "We think $800 a month is fair," he continued, "plus continuing to help with utilities, of course. You'll be making good money now, and this will still be cheaper than getting your own place." Jake snickered. "Welcome to adult life, sis." I looked at my mother, desperate for some recognition of the absurdity. But she was studiously examining her pasta. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the anger building inside. After supporting this family financially through high school and college, working multiple jobs while maintaining a 4.0 GPA, You now want me to pay you $800 a month in rent, plus utilities? Don't be dramatic, Sophia, Dad replied. We've supported you your entire life. Put a roof over your head, food on the table. Now it's time for you to do your part. I wanted to scream. I wanted to list every dollar I had contributed over the past 7 years. I wanted to throw the expensive wine in his face and walk out. Instead, I took a deep breath. I'll think about it. That seemed to satisfy him. The conversation moved on to Jake's summer plans, which apparently involved a road trip with friends that my parents were helping fund. I sat in silence, pushing my chicken around the plate, appetite completely gone. When the bill came, the waiter placed it in front of my father. Again, congratulations to the graduate. Dad looked at the $178 bill, then slid it across the table to me with a wink. Consider this your first adult expense. I placed my credit card on the bill without comment, ignoring Jake's smirk and my mother's uncomfortable glance away. The drive home was silent. I stared out the window, mentally calculating how much money I had given my family over the years and how much I had left in my secret account. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I had made my decision. Tomorrow would be the beginning of my new life, whether they were ready for it or not. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that had been there since I was 10. The dinner conversation replayed in my mind on an endless loop, the casual dismissal of my contributions, the entitlement in my father's voice, Mom's silence, Jake's smug look. 6 months earlier, I'd sat across from Harriet, nervously twisting a tissue. I need to make a change, I'd told her, but I'm afraid of what it will do to my family. Harriet had looked at me with compassion, but also firmness. Sophia, we've reviewed your finances for over a year. Do you know what I see? I shook my head. I see someone who has contributed over $30,000 to her family's expenses while taking on student debt and working herself to exhaustion. I see parents who have come to expect this support as their due. And I see a pattern that will continue indefinitely unless you break it. She pulled out a folder of documentation, bank statements, receipts, a spreadsheet tracking every single contribution. $30,000, I remember thinking, that amount hit me hard. Your starting salary at Meridian Marketing will be $60,000 annually, she continued. If you continue supporting your family at current levels, you will give them approximately $24,000 each year. That's 40% of your income. When she put it that way, the situation seemed even more absurd. You've saved diligently despite these demands, Harriet added. You have $15,000 in your separate account. That's enough for a down payment on a modest home in several neighborhoods we've discussed. That day, we mapped out a plan. I would continue my contributions until graduation to avoid conflict. Meanwhile, I'd work with a realtor, find a property, close before graduation, and move immediately after. Bernard, the realtor Harriet recommended, was instrumental in finding my little house on Maple Street. He understood my budget and timeline. We looked at dozens of properties before finding the right one. A 1950s bungalow, good bones, outdated decor. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a surprisingly spacious living room with a fireplace. Owners are motivated, Bernard explained. They've moved to Arizona, just want to close quickly. The asking price was $175,000. With my credit score, savings, and a first-time homebuyer program, Bernard helped me secure a mortgage with payments less than what my father was demanding in rent. The closing had been nerve-wracking. I took a day off from classes, telling my parents I had an important exam. Instead, I sat at a table with strangers, signing document after document until my hand cramped. When the final paper was signed, Bernard handed me the keys. Congratulations, homeowner. Now, lying in my childhood bedroom for what I knew would be the last time, I felt a strange mix of sadness and resolution. This house held memories, not all of them bad, but it also represented a dynamic that had become increasingly toxic. At 6 a.m., I rose quietly and started packing. I was surprised by how little I actually owned. Clothes fit into 2 suitcases, books and personal items into 3 boxes. By 7:30, everything was stacked neatly by my bedroom door. I heard movement downstairs, Mom's familiar footsteps, the coffee maker gurgling. Taking a deep breath, I carried the first suitcase down. Mom looked up from the kitchen table, surprise on her face. "You're up early. Want some coffee?" "No thanks, Mom," I said, setting the suitcase by the front door. "I'm moving out today." Her coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "What?" "Because of what your father said, honey. He didn't mean you have to leave immediately." "I know," I replied, "but I've been planning this for a while. It's time." She followed me as I went back upstairs for the second suitcase. "But where will you go? Do you have an apartment lined up? You can't just leave without a plan." I smiled despite myself. She genuinely had no idea I was capable of making plans without their knowledge or input. "I have a place," I said simply, adding the second suitcase. By now, the commotion had woken Dad. He appeared in the hallway, hair disheveled, robe hastily tied. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Sophia says she's moving out," Mom explained, wringing her hands. Dad looked at the suitcases, then at me, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. "Because of last night, for God's sake? We were just having a conversation about adult responsibilities. There's no need for dramatics." "This isn't about last night," I said, returning upstairs for my boxes. "This has been my plan for months. I'm starting my new job on Monday, and I need to be settled in my new place before then." "New place?" Dad followed me up the stairs. "What new place? You can't afford a place of your own yet. You need to build up savings first." The irony of him lecturing me about savings when he had systematically drained mine for years was almost laughable. "My new place is all taken care of," I said, lifting a box of books. "I've been saving and planning for this." "Saving?" Dad's voice rose. "How could you be saving when you've been helping us with expenses?" I didn't answer, focusing on carrying my belongings downstairs. Mom was now sitting on the bottom step, looking lost. Jake had emerged from his room, watching the scene with unusual attentiveness. "The moving company will be here at 9, I announced, checking my watch. "I just need to get everything downstairs before they arrive." "Moving company?" Mom's voice was faint. "Sophia, this is all so sudden." It wasn't sudden to me. It was the culmination of years of growing awareness and months of careful planning. But I understood that to them, it seemed to come out of nowhere. They had never considered that I might have a life separate from their needs. "You'll still help with the bills, right?" Dad asked, his anger giving way to concern. "Even if you're not living here?" And there it was. Not worry about my well-being or sadness at my departure, but immediate concern about how my decision would affect their finances. "No," I said. That single word felt like both a betrayal and a liberation. "I will not be paying your bills anymore." The silence that followed was profound. My father's face flushed red. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Jake looked from them to me, finally seeming to understand the dynamics at play. "You can't just abandon your family." Dad sputtered eventually. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I replied. "I'm simply starting my own life." "You always said that was what you wanted for me." The moving truck arrived precisely at 9. 2 men efficiently loaded my meager belongings. I did a final sweep of my room. As I turned to leave, Mom was standing in the doorway, looking smaller somehow. "I didn't realize how little you have," she said softly. After all these years, it was the closest she had come to acknowledging the imbalance that had defined our relationship. I hugged her briefly, then headed downstairs where Dad was arguing with the movers about their parking position. "Dad," I interrupted, "I'm leaving now. I'll call you in a few days when I'm settled." He turned to me, his expression a complex mix of anger and disbelief. "This is how you repay us for everything we've done for you? By running away the moment we ask you to contribute." The unfairness of his statement struck me like a physical blow. But instead of arguing, I simply handed him an envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "A copy of my new address, in case of emergency," I replied, "and a record of the financial contributions I've made to this household over the past 7 years. I thought you might want to review it before we talk again." Then I walked out the door, climbed into my car, and followed the moving truck to my new home and my new beginning. The moving truck pulled up in front of my house at 9:04 a.m. My house. The phrase still felt strange. The modest bungalow with its faded blue paint and white trim looked exactly as I remembered. But now it was mine. I parked behind the truck and sat for a moment, taking it all in. The small front yard needed attention. The porch had a slight sag. The gutters could use cleaning. But the bones were good, and it was mine. Every imperfection represented freedom. Tim and Carlos, the movers, unloaded my few possessions quickly. "That's it?" Tim asked, looking around the living room. "Nothing else coming?" "No," I replied. "Just starting out." Carlos nodded approvingly. "Best way to do it. No clutter. Fresh beginning." After they left, I stood in the center of my empty living room, overwhelmed by the silence and space. I had furniture being delivered later that day, the bare essentials I'd ordered online: a bed, a couch, a small dining table with 2 chairs. Not much, but it was a start. I spent the rest of the morning unpacking clothes and personal items, wiping down counters, sweeping floors. Around noon, a knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find an older woman with silver hair and bright eyes. "Hello there," she said warmly. "I'm Doris Abernathy from next door. I saw the moving truck and wanted to welcome you." She held out a ceramic dish covered with foil. Just a simple casserole. Moving day is exhausting, and everyone needs to eat. I accepted the dish with genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much. I'm Sophia Wilson. I just graduated college, and this is my first house." Doris beamed. "How wonderful. A young homeowner. That's not something you see every day anymore." We chatted for a few minutes. Doris filled me in on the neighborhood, the couple across the street who'd lived there for 30 years, the young family 2 doors down with twins, the best day for trash collection. "If you need anything at all, you just come knock," she said. Oh, and the previous owners left some perennial bulbs in the garden. They'll come up next spring. Beautiful tulips and daffodils. After Doris left, I felt slightly less alone. The idea that flowers planted by previous owners would bloom in my garden next year gave me a strange sense of continuity, a connection to the history of this place that was now mine. The furniture arrived at 3 p.m. By 5, I had the semblance of a home. That first night alone was both terrifying and exhilarating. Every creak of the old building made me jump. The shadows seemed different. The street noises were unfamiliar. But underlying the nervousness was a profound sense of accomplishment. I had done this. I had created this opportunity for myself, despite years of financial drainage and emotional manipulation. I slept fitfully, waking several times. But by morning, I felt more settled. I made coffee in the new coffee maker I'd treated myself to and sat at my little table, planning my day. Monday would be my first day at Meridian Marketing, but I had the weekend to continue organizing. Sunday evening, my phone began buzzing with texts. I deliberately kept it off for most of the weekend, needing space. Now, the outside world was intruding. "Mom, hope you're settled in. Please let us know you're okay. Dad, the internet bill is due Tuesday. Will you be sending money? Jake, Dad is freaking out about bills. What did you do?" I responded only to my mother, assuring her I was fine and settled. To the others, I maintained silence. It was harder than I expected. Years of conditioning had taught me to respond immediately to financial requests, to prioritize their needs. Breaking that pattern felt almost physically painful. Monday came, and with it, my first day as a marketing coordinator at Meridian. The day passed in a blur of new faces, orientation, paperwork. By the time I returned to my little blue house, I was exhausted but exhilarated. This was the beginning of my career, my independent life. Tuesday brought more texts from my father, increasingly urgent. "Dad, the electricity bill is past due. They're threatening to shut it off." "Dad, did you get my message about the internet bill? It's important for Jake's schoolwork." "Dad, Sophia, you cannot just ignore your family responsibilities." Wednesday, my mother called during my lunch break, her voice tight with worry. "Honey, I know you're establishing your independence, and I respect that, but your father is very stressed about the bills. Could you just help us out one more time while we figure things out?" "Mom," I said gently, "I've been helping out one more time for 7 years. Dad needs to figure out how to manage the household budget without my income." "But the electricity might be shut off tomorrow," she said, her voice trembling. And the internet already has been. Jake has a paper due. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. I almost caved right then, almost offered to pay the bill just this once. But Harriet's voice echoed in my mind. This pattern will continue as long as you allow it. I'm sorry, Mom, I said. I can't help anymore. Dad has a job. You have a job. The two of you need to figure this out. Thursday evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my entire family standing on my porch. Dad looked angry, Mom anxious, Jake uncomfortable. This is where you live now? Dad asked without preamble, looking past me into the house. You bought a house? Yes, I replied, blocking the doorway. Would you like to come in? They filed past me into the small living room. Dad immediately started examining everything, checking the fireplace, looking at the ceiling, opening doors to inspect other rooms. Mom sat cautiously on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap. Jake wandered into the kitchen, opening the refrigerator without asking. How did you afford this? Dad demanded. Where did the money come from? I saved, I said simply. And I qualified for a first-time homebuyer program. Saved from what? His voice rose. You gave us every spare penny. Not every penny, I corrected. I set aside a portion of my earnings for my future. I've been doing it for years. So you lied to us? He accused. All those times you said you were broke, that you couldn't help more with the bills, you were hiding money. Several of my new neighbors were out in their yards, pretending not to watch the confrontation. Doris had come out to water her flowers, her concerned gaze flickering to us. I never lied, I said firmly. I contributed thousands of dollars to your household. I worked multiple jobs through high school and college to help support the family, but I also protected myself because no one else was going to. We're your parents. Mom interjected. We've always protected you. Have you? I asked, looking directly at her. Or have you protected Dad and his poor financial choices at my expense? Her gaze dropped to her hands. The electric company shut off the power this afternoon, Dad said, his anger giving way to desperation. The house is dark. The food in the refrigerator will spoil. Is that what you want? Of course not, I replied. But I want you to understand that it is not my responsibility to fix this. It never should have been. Jake had returned from his kitchen inspection. So what? You're just going to let us suffer because you're mad about paying rent? That's cold, Sophia. This is not about rent, I said, my own frustration. Building. This is about 7 years of supporting this family while being treated like a personal ATM. This is about Dad's gambling and Mom's enabling, and you never having to contribute a dime while I worked myself to exhaustion. The word gambling hung in the air. Jake looked at Dad in confusion. Mom's eyes filled with tears. You don't know what you're talking about. Dad blustered, but the fight was leaving his voice. I think I do, I replied. And I think it's time we all acknowledge the reality of our family dynamic. How dare you accuse me of gambling, my father said, his voice dangerously low. After everything we've done for you. Dad, please, I replied, trying to keep my tone even. Let's be honest with each other for once. I know about the casino visits. I know about the online poker accounts. I know about the loans. His face paled slightly, but he maintained his defensive posture. Everyone needs recreation. A few games here and they're not gambling. Mom was staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Jake looked confused, his eyes moving from Dad to me and back again. What is she talking about? He asked Mom. Dad doesn't gamble. The silence that followed was answer enough. Jake's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. Is that true? He pressed. Is that why we're always broke, even though you and Mom both work and Sophia has been paying bills? Your sister is exaggerating, Dad insisted. And regardless, our financial situation is none of your concern. What matters now is that your sister has abandoned her family obligations and left us in a desperate situation. I walked to my new dining table, where my laptop sat, and opened a spreadsheet I'd created with Harriet's help. I think we need to look at some facts. I turned the screen so they could all see it. This is a record of every financial contribution I have made to our household since I was 16 years old. Every bill payment, every grocery purchase, every direct deposit to your account. The spreadsheet was meticulous. Dates, amounts, descriptions. 7 years of financial support, laid out in black and white. The total at the bottom is $87,342, I said. That is how much I have contributed to our family while working minimum wage jobs and attending school full-time. Mom gasped. Dad's face flushed red. Even I was shocked seeing the number in its entirety. Somehow, adding it all up made the situation even more stark than I had realized. That can't be right, Dad muttered, leaning closer. You're making this up. I have receipts and bank statements for every entry, I replied. This is not an estimate. This is the exact amount I have given to support our family. While you gambled away your paycheck and Mom pretended not to notice. Mom let out a sob, covering her face. I didn't know what to do, she whispered. He kept saying it was the last time, that he would win it all back. That's what addicts always say, I said gently. But it is never the last time without real help. Jake had moved to look at the spreadsheet, his expression hardening as he scrolled. You paid for my graduation party? He asked, pointing to an entry. Dad said he saved up for it. I paid for a lot of things that were supposedly from Dad, I confirmed. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, car repairs. I paid you back for some of those. Dad protested weakly. Some, I agreed. A small fraction. Jake turned to our parents, anger evident. Why was Sophia paying for everything? Why did neither of you ever tell me what was really going on? We wanted to protect you, Mom said, finally looking up. We didn't want you to worry about adult problems. So instead, you let Sophia carry everything? Jake's voice rose. She's only 3 years older than me. She was still a kid, too. His defense of me was unexpected and touching. For years, I had resented his carefree existence. Now I realized he had been as much in the dark as I had been. The point is, Dad said, trying to regain control. We are in crisis now. The electricity is off. We need help. I closed the laptop and faced my family. I am willing to help, but not by giving you money. That approach has not worked for 7 years, and it will not work now. What does that mean? Dad asked suspiciously. It means I will help you develop a realistic budget based on your actual income. It means Dad needs to get help for his gambling addiction. It means Mom needs to stop enabling destructive behaviors. And it means Jake might need to get a part-time job to contribute, just like I did at his age. Gambling addiction is a strong term, Dad mumbled. Is it? I asked. How much have you lost in the past year alone? How many times have you promised to stop? How many bills have gone unpaid because the money went to gambling instead? He had no answer. I own this house outright, I said, the statement causing all 3 of them to stare at me in shock. No mortgage. I saved enough for a substantial down payment, and the first-time homebuyer program covered the rest based on my income and credit score. That is impossible, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Not impossible when you've been saving since you were 16 and recently received a signing bonus from your new employer, I replied. Not impossible when you've been learning about financial planning instead of looking for the next quick win. The reality of my independence was finally sinking in. My father's face had gone from red to pale. The full implications were becoming clear. I would not be returning to rescue them. I would not be sending money. The ATM they had relied on for years was permanently closed. So that is it? Dad asked, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. You're just cutting us off completely? I am giving you a choice, I clarified. Option 1. I help you create a financial plan. Dad seeks treatment for gambling addiction. Mom takes a more active role in household finances, and Jake contributes through part-time work. We rebuild our relationship on healthier terms. And option 2? Mom asked quietly. Option 2 is that you continue as you have been, but without my financial support. You figure it out on your own. That is not much of a choice, Dad muttered. More choice than I had at 16, I replied evenly. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions, years of resentment, manipulation, and misplaced responsibilities. Finally, Jake spoke up. I want option 1. And I already applied for a job at the grocery store where Sophia used to work. Mom looked at him in surprise, then at me. I want option 1 too. I should have been stronger years ago. I'm sorry, Sophia. All eyes turned to Dad. He stood rigid, pride warring with necessity on his face. You really own this house? He asked again. I nodded. And we might lose ours if things don't change, he acknowledged reluctantly. The second mortgage you took out last year without telling Mom is catching up to you, I said, revealing that I knew even more than they thought. Mom gasped. Second mortgage, Robert? You said that was a small personal loan. Dad's shoulders slumped. The facade finally crumbled completely. I will try option 1, he said, his voice barely audible. But I don't have a problem. I can stop anytime. That is the first thing we will need to address, I said firmly. You cannot solve a problem you will not acknowledge. As they prepared to leave, the reality of their situation visibly weighed on them. No electricity at home, mounting bills, secrets exposed. The dynamic had shifted irreversibly. We will talk tomorrow about next steps, I said as they stood on my porch. For tonight, you can stay at the Comfort Inn on 4th Street. I will call and pay for one night while you figure things out. It was the only financial assistance I was willing to offer, a buffer to ease the transition, rather than a return to old patterns. As their car pulled away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: guilt for their predicament, anger at years of exploitation, hope that real change might be possible. But most of all, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. The truth was finally out in the open, and with it came the possibility of healing. 3 months after that confrontation on my porch, life had changed dramatically for all of us. My little blue house had truly become mine, with personal touches that made it feel like home. I'd painted the living room a warm cream, hung curtains, planted flowers in the front yard with advice from Doris. Each change, no matter how small, represented my independence and growing sense of self. At work, I was thriving. Meridian Marketing challenged me, and my supervisors had already recognized my work ethic. A small promotion came after just 2 months, along with managing our social media. The stability of a regular paycheck that was mine alone felt like an absolute luxury. The relationship with my family had evolved into something I couldn't have imagined on that tense graduation night. It hadn't been easy, and there had been setbacks, but progress was undeniable. Dad initially resisted Gamblers Anonymous, insisting he could control it. It took the mortgage company sending a formal foreclosure notice to finally break through his denial. The night he received that letter, he called me in tears, something I'd never witnessed before. I don't want to lose our home, he choked out. I don't want to lose my family. Please help me. The next day, I drove him to his first GA meeting. He's gone 3 times a week since. It's difficult for him, requiring an honesty and vulnerability that don't come naturally, but seeing him work the 12-step program, acknowledging the harm his addiction caused, gave me hope that real change was possible. Mom found full-time work as an office manager at a local dental practice, doubling her library income. The job gave her not just financial security, but a confidence I hadn't seen in her before. She also started attending support groups for families of gambling addicts, learning how her enabling behavior had contributed to the problem. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping the peace, she told me over coffee one Sunday afternoon. But I was just making it possible for the situation to continue. I failed you, Sophia. I let you carry burdens that were never yours to bear. Her acknowledgement of my experience was healing in ways I hadn't expected. For years, I had felt invisible, valued only for what I could provide. Having my mother see me, truly see me, was a gift. Jake surprised everyone with his response. He got a part-time job at the grocery store and contributed his earnings to the household. More importantly, he stepped up emotionally, often mediating between our parents. I never realized how much you did for us, he told me one evening when he visited. I was so caught up in my own life that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. I'm sorry for being such a self-centered jerk. His apology meant more than he could know. The resentment I'd carried toward him began to dissolve, replaced by genuine fondness for the young man he was becoming. As for me, the most significant change was internal. The constant anxiety about money that had been my companion since adolescence was gradually subsiding. I was learning to spend on myself without guilt, to save for my future without fear, and to establish boundaries without apology. Part of that growth included dating for the first time in years. Romantic relationships had seemed an impossible luxury during college. Now I was seeing Vincent, a graphic designer I met through work. Our relationship was still new, but his respect for my independence and understanding of my family history made him easy to be with. My friendship with Elaine had deepened too. She'd been right all along, and her unwavering support was crucial. The family financial situation had stabilized. With Dad's gambling under control, Mom's new job, and Jake's contribution, they managed to negotiate with the mortgage company and keep the house. They were on a strict budget I'd helped create, but did not fund. Sometimes they slipped up, and occasionally Dad would hint about needing help, but I maintained my boundaries with gentle firmness. "I can help you figure out how to handle that within your budget," I'd offer, "or we can look at what expenses might be reduced this month." It wasn't always easy. Years of conditioning had trained me to rescue them. Sometimes the guilt was overwhelming, especially when Mom mentioned canceling small luxuries or Jake talked about delaying college plans to work more. But I reminded myself that true help meant supporting their independence, not fostering dependence. One Sunday evening, almost exactly 3 months after our confrontation, my family came to my house for dinner. It was our new tradition, a weekly meal that symbolized our changing relationship. I'd prepared a simple but delicious meal, and we sat around my small dining table, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in years. "I have some news," Dad announced as we finished dessert. "I've been offered a position at Anderson Technology. It's not management level like my old job, but the salary is better than what I'm making now, and there's room for advancement." "That's wonderful," Mom exclaimed, genuine pride in her voice. "Congratulations, Dad," I added, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "You deserve this opportunity." He squeezed back, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I couldn't have done it without all of you, especially you, Sophia. Your tough love saved this family, even when we fought against it." His acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had wanted nothing more than for my parents to see me, to value me for more than my financial contribution. This simple recognition felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. As they prepared to leave that evening, Mom hugged me tightly. "I am so proud of the woman you have become," she whispered. "You taught us all what real strength looks like." Standing on my porch, watching their car drive away, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The journey had been painful, the confrontations difficult, and the changes challenging. But through it all, I had discovered my own worth beyond what I could provide for others. I had learned that true family supports each other's growth, rather than exploiting each other's weaknesses. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them and instead stand beside them as they learn to rescue themselves. Life wasn't perfect. My family still struggled at times. I still battled old habits of over-responsibility. But we were all growing, healing, and building something healthier together. And that was worth every difficult conversation, every painful boundary, and every brave step toward change.